Well, good morning, everyone. It's our good afternoon or good evening, depending on where in the world you are at this present moment. As always, it's great to share this time again together. And as Derek just read, my talk today is money, day 18. If only we did not need it. Um, this presentation will be fairly short, but in thinking about money, in thinking about the subject, I thought back to my childhood. And when I was 6 or 7, I remember one Sunday morning, my mother and sister and I were on our way to church. That would be Catholic Mass. And we were driving, and we passed a construction site where they were building some new homes. And I remember thinking at that, as a young, incredibly naive 7-year-old, I remember thinking, wouldn't it be nice to live in a world where there was no money? Where those men just built the house for whoever needed it. And they were happy to do that without any monetary reward because whatever they needed would be taken care of by other people in the same fashion. So the grocer would give them all the groceries they needed. And the clothier would give them all the clothes. And people in the medical profession, like my mother, would give them all the medical care they needed. And everyone just took care of each other, and we didn't really care about money or trade. Everyone would still get up and have something to do. And of course, in this world, I also envisioned that people who were physically unable would just be taken care of. We would understand that they're not in a position to work, so they'd be taken care of. They wouldn't have to worry about the fact that they're not able to contribute the way other people can contribute with real sort of physical necessities and so forth. But everyone's life is valuable in some way, regardless of their abilities. And we all have different abilities, of course. And I shared these musings with my mother at the time, and she was a very wise woman, and her response to me was, if only. And, it's funny, of course I grew up, and like the rest of you, I have to survive in the real world. And, the world that I envisioned as a 7-year-old child, that's not the world we live in. It's just not. It would be nice. And of course, I think that's what my mother meant when she said, if only. But I just want to point out something. That world that I envisioned as a naive 7-year-old, it's not like it requires any magic for that to happen. I'm not saying anything here that couldn't happen. It actually could happen. We could choose to live in a world that way if we could all get together and agree on it. And this would be a world without borders, without countries, without business, so to speak. We'd just replace business with other things. People would still do things. They just wouldn't necessarily do it for the acquisition of wealth. It would just be an idea that wouldn't be on the scope, acquiring wealth. And I always like to maintain hope and positivity, and I hope one day we get there. And then in some ways, I also think of it, this is a vast universe we live in, and who knows how many other Earth-like planets there are in it. Maybe there's a planet somewhere out there who's achieved this. Just like I said, I'm not invoking any magic here. It wouldn't take superheroes or supernatural beings to make this happen. We could do it. I often wonder, even today, as someone who's not naive anymore, What stops us? I don't necessarily have an answer. I just threw that out there as a rhetorical question. But that's really not what this presentation is about. But this presentation is actually about money. And of course, this is a Tao meeting. So what is the Tao approach to wealth and money? Well, I want to start off by talking about some incorrect perceptions that prevail often in the West. So one of those incorrect perceptions is that somehow money and wealth will lead to corruption and ruination. And I think this is largely because of the Judeo-Christian influence. I think it's probably likely, a lot of people connected to this meeting were probably raised in a Christian home, or I was Catholic, but again, it's a form of Christianity. And an idea that you'll hear because it's part of the Bible is the quote that says, "It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to get to heaven." Well, from a practical standpoint, it's impossible for a camel to go through the eye of a needle, at least the camels we have here on Earth. And I think a lot of people hear that and they think, well, wealth is something to be avoided. And we have other things too, like blessed are the poor and so forth. All that sort of stems from Christianity. And I've actually met people who say to me, like, the fact that they're lacking is somehow glorifying God. And I've also heard this when people are sick, they'll say that their illness glorifies God. I remember when I was training to be an EMT when I was very young. I had to work in a hospital for a while as part of the training. And I came across a man who was very sick. And I was taking his vitals because we had to do that. And he said that to me. He said, "My illness glorifies the Lord." Now, I wasn't quite an atheist yet, but I remember thinking, gosh, that's an odd position to have. And I think it's the same with the idea of money and wealth. Money and wealth aren't bad in and of themselves. It all depends on how you acquire it. If you're honest, you don't cheat people, you work hard, you come up with ideas of value that you then market and make money to take care of the necessities you have in your life. There's nothing wrong with that, and acquiring wealth and being in a position to have more control over your time and what you do and so forth. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. What's really important is how you go about acquiring the wealth. I mean, if you just greedily want to acquire wealth and step on everyone to get it and not care about being honorable, well, that's not good. And that's probably where the Christian quote was trying to go with the camel and the needle thing, basically. I think that was the point he was trying to make. Though I think a lot of people don't see it that way. They tend to take it literally. And I think that's a mistake. The Tao doesn't want us to be poor. The Tao doesn't want you to be rich. I would venture to say that Tao doesn't care one way or another what you do. Not everyone likes that idea, but the truth is, I mean, you're in control of your life. You choose how you want to look at things. There's no crime in attaining wealth. In fact, when an honorable person attains wealth, and I've had the good fortune of knowing some pretty wealthy people, and while I'm sure there are probably people in the world who do nothing but buy mansions, yachts, and helicopter pads, I've never met any. What I found is that when people acquire a lot of wealth, they tend to become more generous. Sometimes whether they want to or not. I mean, people who are wealthy tend to pay a lot in taxes that society uses. Probably could manage the use of the money better, but, you know, at any rate, a lot of it goes to good, or at least tries to. So in accumulating wealth, you can acquire more responsibility. You're able to be more generous. But it is hard when you're not wealthy. I mean, of course, money can't buy happiness. We all hear that. And it's true, but to some degree, of course, having no money at all isn't going to, there's no way you're going to be happy in the society we live in with no money at all. That's just unrealistic. We don't live in the world I envisioned as a child. We live in the world we live in right now. And, you know, it's good to be honest with yourself about where you are in life. And I'm going to inject a little humor into this presentation today. But I have somewhat of a serious point behind the funniness. And that's this, an honest question that I want to ask everyone. If you gifted a lottery ticket to someone and they won, hey, how angry would you be? Be honest. Well, I'll share my answer with you. Here's my honest answer. I'd be really mad. In fact, so much so that I've insulated myself against this possibility while still reserving the ability to gift lottery tickets to people in my life. And I'll tell you how I do that. So if I'm going to give someone a lottery ticket, I go to the store and I buy 3 lottery tickets, the same number. And if I'm going to give it to my best friend, who I love, I would give him 2 tickets and keep 1 for myself. And that's largely because I know and love him. And I know that if for some reason I squandered my $1 million and ended up, I don't know, let's say I squandered on recreational drugs or something, I know that if he had his $2 million left, he would get me into rehab and get me cleaned up so I could start over. So I'd be okay with giving him the 2 tickets and keeping the 1. And other people in my life, you know, I might do it the other way around. I might even say to them, hey, I bought 3 tickets. 1's for you. They're all the same. So if we win, I'll be twice as rich as you. It's a good gag gift, and it always gets a laugh. But, and now more to my serious point, once we master the karmic mechanism, we won't have to buy 2 extra tickets anymore, thus freeing the extra $2 to go to feeding and sheltering the poor. Or we could keep up the practice and then we'd have millions of dollars to go to help feeding and sheltering the poor. But from a practical standpoint, I'll be honest with you, I'm not there yet. And an honest answer to that question is a good gauge. And of course, like I said, I was being a little humorous with this, but seriously, there is a point to it. You know, between the lines there is a point to be made. So I'm going to start to sum it up now. We live in a world where human beings have not evolved to the point where we all look out for one another without being afraid of losing access to the limited resources for which we all compete to some degree. But the Tao approach will eventually walk us all to a better world if only we all embrace the teaching. No magic required. We all just have to start doing it. You know, years ago when I first came to the temple, Derek's talked about Chris before, and Chris, Derek, and I, and probably a couple other people were having lunch after the meeting. And I remember Chris saying, you know, in a world where everyone looks out for one another, you don't have to worry about taking care of number one. I may not have exactly what he said, but he said, in paraphrasing it, that was the sentiment of what he said. And how true that is. But, and I'm pretty sure, as I recall, Chris also mentioned that unfortunately that's not the world we live in. And from a practical, realistic standpoint, we don't live in that world. And I'll add the phrase, the word "yet" to that, leaving a little hope out there. So, largely due to the Christian Judeo influence on Western culture, there are some who think that poverty glorifies God, and that the poor are blessed, and that God does not want anyone to obtain wealth any more than he wants camels to start walking through needles. Well, my answer to that is this next point. Newsflash. Poverty does not glorify God. The poor won't be blessed unless those with wealth help them, or they help themselves. And camels are never going to start walking through needles, at least not the size camels that we're familiar with, or the needles we're familiar with. Acquiring wealth with integrity, honesty, and hard work is honorable. The wealth will allow you to help others in a way that you could not if you did not possess it in the first place. Conversely, obtaining wealth by dishonesty or by taking advantage of others and then being greedy with the wealth you obtain is dishonorable. So with great wealth comes great responsibility. There's no problem with having wealth or aspiring to be wealthy. You know, when I look at the super rich in our society here in the United States, the Warren Buffetts and the Zuckermans and so forth, I think about how much those two men alone, and Bill Gates too, those three men, what's to say, how much they've given, billions, towards charitable work. I don't know, maybe if we all became billionaires, we'd get to that world I envisioned when I was 7. Boy, we've all got tons of money, let's just get rid of it. Let's just start taking care of each other. No one needs to be unemployed, we got a lot of work to do. You know, hey, one, we got to figure out how to get off this planet in the next 2 billion years because, well, our solar system isn't going to last forever. Maybe we could figure out time travel and hop over to the next planet. Maybe we could help the people there get rid of money too. Okay, so that's the end of my presentation today. As always, I want to end with a book recommendation, The Tao of Joy Every Day, a great book to use daily to help one study and learn the Tao teachings and put them into action. So there it was, money, day 18. If only we did not need it. Thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today. I hope I said something that was of use, and I hope you all have a wonderful Sunday.
Thank you so much, Alex. Alex, your talk takes me back to the 80s. You may recall I mentioned previously that I went to an all-boys Catholic high school, so I felt a sense of connection, with my teachers from high school, many of whom were priests, and I remember having a discussion about that very passage from the Bible about how a wealthy man cannot enter heaven, just as camel cannot go through the eye of the needle. And I remember that one of the people I discussed this with recommended some books on archaeology for me to look into that had a connection with biblical passages. So, make a long story short, turns out that one particular theory about that has to do with a gate in ancient Jerusalem. One of the gates was called the Eye of the Needle because it was narrow and also it wasn't very tall. To pass through, you would need to go through single file, one at a time, and you would also a camel would also need to lower its head to be able to go through because it's not very high. The clearance is not very high. So the point that was made was that perhaps this particular passage was speaking metaphorically using that actual gate in ancient Jerusalem, and the idea was that if you are wealthy and you want to go to heaven, you must, like the camel, lower your head. That is, assume an attitude of humility in order to pass through the eye of the needle, that gateway, like the camel. You have to go to heaven. You can only go to heaven if you practice the virtue of being humble. So I thought that was quite interesting, and I wanted to share that with the group.